shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we are not afraid someday. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome one day. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Good morning. My name is Pam Wycliffe, and I'm a member of the board of this congregation. Welcome to you all. Excuse me, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Elkhart is a welcoming community, encouraging religious freedom, nurturing individual spiritual and ethical growth, celebrating diversity, and promoting a just and sustainable world. If you would like to learn more about this fellowship, please look at our website, UUFE.org. Enjoy. Thank you.
You're muted, Judy.
I'm sorry, I thought I wasn't. Okay, well, welcome everybody. So I'm Judy Darnell, a member of the UUFE, and I have the community or the fellowship life for this morning. And I think we have several announcements. Claiborne has informed me that progress is being made toward the surveying of the parking lot. After this, plans can be finalized. Our food pantry has been very popular with our neighbors recently. That means our shelves are often empty. So each of us who is able could remember to pick up a few non-perishable items with your regular shopping. And you could let Mike Darnell or me know if you need to arrange a time to deliver those into the church. Next, our men's group, BUMS, will meet on the 23rd at 3:30 at El Camino Real on County Road 6. All members and friends are welcome. And more food. Wednesday feasters will meet on the 26th at Bancock Place, which is at 705 County Road 6 in Elkhart. And contact Mary Adams if you'd like to join us on the 24th. Let her know by the 24th. And her email is createenjoy, all one word with two e's together, @yahoo.com. And we have heard this morning that Phyllis Hostetler is in the hospital. Gordon, would you like to add to that? And unmute yourself if you do, please. Gordon? Unmute yourself, please.
There,
we
I
go.
unmuted finally. Okay, Phyllis is in the hospital. She had some minor urinary tract surgery, and I'm expecting her home either today or tomorrow.
We'll give her all our best. Okay, there's good news about Vern Thomas. So he's back home at Elkhart Place. He's on oxygen, but is strong enough to walk. And I'm sure he'd be able, would be delighted to get phone calls and can be reached through the Elkhart Place switchboard or cell phone. And his phone number there is 317-908-9003. And you may also be glad to hear that the Fellowship Focus is going to be revived. For those of you unfamiliar with the Focus, it provides a lot of information that you find in the weekly update, plus other things as well. The board has asked Mike and me to coordinate the publication of the Focus, and with Ron, we'll work with Ron Gill on keeping things updated through the both media, and we will be working with the Communications Committee on that. And we hope to find several ways in order to make sure people have easy access to the Focus. And I will warn committee chairs and board members that I will be expecting people to keep me updated on their meetings, and I tend to nag if you don't. So you can stick a note in the Focus mailbox in the church office, or contact me through email or telephone or coffee hour, cross our fingers. But don't text me, please. I don't text. So, okay, thank you, and let's go on to the service.
Good morning, everybody. This is Carl Rust. I'm president of the board. And I'm going to take an opportunity on Sundays just to kind of keep you updated on what's going on. First thing, I have bad news, which a lot of you already know, that we are back in the red. And that means that we are limited to virtual meetings whenever possible. We can have small groups in the sanctuary or in the fellowship if it's essential business that can't be taken care of otherwise, which means we're going to have to postpone again opening. We were hoping to do it fairly soon, but it looks like we're back to red, so it'll be a little while. We're going to keep watching the situation though, and hopefully before too long, we'll be able to get back together in person. Next week, we're going to try something a little different. So we'll be on Zoom. At least I'll be on Zoom at 10 o'clock. I don't know if other people will be here or not. But we're going to take a little virtual field trip. And we're going to be going to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bloomington. And here's their website. And they do a live stream service Sunday mornings at 10:15. So we'll have a little bit of an opening here on Zoom. And then we will go virtually, almost like we got a bus and everybody jumped in and we drove down to Bloomington. So without having to take a whole day to do it. So that'll be next Sunday. And then the Sunday after that, I believe the CUPS group is going to be having the service. So stay tuned for more information about that. The other announcement I have today is we are ready to start receiving your preferences for days and times for small group meetings. And we've talked a lot about this, and you've probably been wondering, well, yeah, they keep talking about it. When are they going to actually do something? So we've got a Google form, and I'm going to repost the link in the chat. It'll be going out in the update on Monday as well. If you click on this form, I'm going to show you what happens. But let me get myself in order here. When you click on this form link, you're going to go to a place that looks like this, and you just fill in your name, email, phone number, and those are all, I mean, we probably have everybody's phone number, but just in case. What day of the week would you prefer to meet, and what time of day, morning, afternoon, evening, if you have any questions or comments? And when you push submit, that immediately goes into a spreadsheet that we can look at. So we can kind of see where are people wanting to meet, what days, what times, and we'll start, as soon as we get that information, we'll start assigning you to a group. So at earliest convenience, click on that link and fill that out. Now, if you're maybe not too tech savvy, or you don't really understand, call one of us or email and we'll help. We'll walk you through it, or we'll just say, okay, you want to do Saturday mornings, then we'll fill it out for you. But we want to try to get everybody assigned to a group. We're going to have round one coming up real soon, as we get enough people together to make groups. We're at least going to do 2 rounds of this, but I just have a feeling that through this process, more questions are going to come up and more interesting ideas are going to come up. So we may continue round 3 or round 4. It just kind of depends. We definitely have round 1 and round 2 kind of planned, and we'll kind of see what happens after that. If you have any questions about that, feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email, or anybody on the board should be able to help you. All right, I guess that's all for me. So I'm going to continue with the gong and chalice, and we'll just continue on with our service here.
We ring the gong 3 times. Once for those who came before us and made a place for us. Once for those who are here now. Once for those who will come after us and build on the dream. Our chalice lighting is by Maureen Killeran. As the kindling of this chalice calls us to community, let there be light. As the flame of this chalice reminds us of our values, let there be light. As the glow of this chalice encourages us to hope, let there be light. Let there be light.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service
is its law.
To dwell
together in peace,
to seek the
to
truth
seek
in
the
love,
truth in love,
and to help one another.
This
is our
This
covenant.
the God who loves sustains, rise the love.
Good morning. Thank you for having me speak to you. I appreciate the invitation. And again, I'm glad to be here. I am the Reverend Dr. James Clifton from Millersburg, Indiana. Non-professionally, I like to be called Jimmy because I grew up in the South and that's what we do down there. With Jimmys and Johnnies and Tommies and Billies and Bubbas. And when people struggle with calling a grown man Jimmy, I just remind them that it is definitely better than being called Bubba. Before we begin, I want to say a few things. I suffer from allergies year long, so periodically I sniffle and periodically my voice cracks. Also, I have diabetes, and over the years I've had some seizures that have at times caused my memory to not work as well as I would like it to. And sometimes it affects my thought processes, where I'm not as cohesive or sequential as I'd like to be. Goes and comes. Hopefully today will be a good day for me. I'd like to begin by reading from the New Testament, 1 Corinthians 13, which is commonly known as the love chapter. And as we look around society today, we don't see a lot of love, do we? See a lot of hate. See a lot of division. See a lot of animosity. 1 Corinthians 13. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not love in my heart, I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of all prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not love in my heart, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love in my heart, I gain nothing. Love is long-suffering and kind. Love does not envy. Love does not make a vain display of itself and does not boast. Does not behave unseemly, seeks not its own, is not easily provoked, thinks of no evil, rejoices not over iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For now we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is imperfect shall come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now, we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, and then shall I know even as I have also known. And now abide faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Creator of the universe, I'm grateful to be here to speak to these people. And I pray that they will be inspired and encouraged to move and to act, to instill love and kindness in one another, to display and to demonstrate love and kindness to one another. Amen. I understand that the theme for this particular congregation this month is living intentionally, or something like that. I had it sent to me in a text, and with my not very good ability in technology, somehow the message got erased. So I think that's it, something like that. That's the fad of the day, isn't it? To be intentional, to live intentionally. I conduct psychotherapy over the internet, and there's not a week that goes by that most of my clients don't say things like that. I'm going to be more intentional. I want to live more intentionally. What does that mean? It doesn't mean a whole lot to me. It reminds me of Rick Warren and his purpose-driven life philosophy of a number of years ago. We heard people talking about, I'm going to be more purpose-driven. And yet every single person that I have known who has said they're going to be more purpose-driven or be more intentional hasn't done anything. To me, the word intentional doesn't mean a whole lot because it does not imply action, activity, movement, fluidity. I would challenge this congregation to move beyond intention and to be impactful. To me, being impactful, the word impactful means action, activity, movement, fluidity. Now, you may say it's just semantics. Is it really? I want you to stop and think about that. As a matter of fact, I'd like you to take the rest of this week to dissect that, to break it down, to examine it, and come up with your own decision of whether it's just simple semantics or not. I want you to do that on your own, because the main purpose of a sermon, of a message, is not to tell people how to think. It's to provide information that creates in them the process of thinking. That's what education is, isn't it? We don't really go to college to learn facts. We go to college to learn how to think. And I want you to do that. I could give you the answers of the difference between intentionality and impactful, between being intentional and being impactful. And I gave you my definition. There are others, but I want you to do that on your own. The message this morning is not going to be a happy message. It's not going to be a feel-good message, because tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day. And one of my favorite quotes from history, it's been attributed to many people, from Edmund Burke to Winston Churchill and to others. So there are several variations of the quote. My favorite variation is, if we don't remember history, we are doomed to repeat it. And with tomorrow being Martin Luther King Day, if we don't remember the history of his life, if we don't remember what he sacrificed his life for, what he gave up his life for, we are doomed to repeat the darkness and the ugliness of his time. And as we look around society today, we're kind of seeing that, aren't we? We're seeing some of that darkness and some of that ugliness reappear. The scripture reading this morning talked about love and talked about kindness. Where can we be impactful in demonstrating love and in demonstrating kindness one to another? Let me give you an example of where this was done. During World War II, many of you have heard of the Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. His entire family were put in concentration camps. Frankl himself was at 4 different concentration camps. His mother and his sister, his mother and his brother were gassed. His father died of starvation and pneumonia. His wife died of typhus. And Viktor Frankl wrote a book entitled Man's Search for Meaning. Now remember, this is way before we got more concerned about proper language. And during those times, man was used to represent mankind, humankind. Man's Search for Meaning. A small book written in 2 parts. The first part talked about his experiences in the prison camps. The second part was about a therapy he developed called logotherapy or logotherapy. And in the first part of the book, Frankl talks about his horrible experiences, talks about the darkness and the suffering. And he said that many times he felt like he was going to freeze to death or die of starvation or from lack of proper medical care. And he talked about these long marches where he felt his feet were literally going to freeze off because the boots he had been given were worn out. And he talks in the book about wrapping his feet with rags in hopes that would prevent frostbite and maybe losing toes or losing an entire foot. And he says as he lay down at night, thinking about all of the darkness and all of the suffering and the lack of love and kindness in that environment, he decided that he was not going to allow the suffering and the darkness to conquer his life, to overpower his life. And he said he began to decide that if he can't change his circumstances, this is one of the great things that have come out of logotherapy. If you can't change your circumstances, you can change your attitude. And that's what he did. He decided that rather lying around and suffering and wallowing in his misery and suffering, that he was going to find meaning and purpose in his life. And he began to do that by showing love and kindness to his fellow detainees, prisoners, whatever we want to call them. People who had lost all hope. People who felt helpless and hopeless. And he worked with them. He encouraged them. He inspired them. He showed them love and kindness. He ministered to them in numerous ways, giving them food that he had, giving them medicine that he had, giving them some of his clothing, giving them some of his cover so they could keep warm at night. There's where he found meaning and purpose in the suffering and meaning and purpose in the darkness. And he found meaning and purpose by thinking about getting out, by focusing on the future, by deciding that when he got out, the meaning and purpose for him would be to let the whole world know about the suffering and the darkness of those horrible days. And then he found meaning and purpose in thinking about reuniting with family and friends who had survived the Holocaust. And many of those who suffered along with Frankl said if it had not been for Frankl, they would have surely died. But they found meaning and hope and purpose in their suffering through the help and the assistance and the love and the kindness of Viktor Frankl. As I said, some of this message is not going to be a feel-good message. We talk about love in our scripture. We talk about kindness in our scripture. If I were to ask you this morning, what is your definition or what do you see as the antonym of love? I'm guessing that most of us would say hate. Many of the definitions that we give for words are based on our experiences. My definition, my antonym for hate, the opposite of love, rather, the opposite of love for me is not hate, it is ugliness. Down south, we tell our children, stop being ugly. We talk about people who are ugly, not physical appearance, but conduct and attitude. Conduct and attitude. Let me tell you about my very first experience with ugliness. 7 years old in New Orleans, living in the housing projects. Yes, grew up very poor. Went through the entire gamut of the system. Welfare checks, commodities, food stamps, free lunches in the school. One morning on my way to school, riding a school bus, was fortunate enough to sit on the right side of the bus by the window, maybe not so fortunate as I think about it. And every morning on the way to school, we would sing songs. And one of the songs we sang was This Old Man. I'm sure you remember that. And we were loud. But as we got closer to the school, the loudness was overcome by even more loudness outside. And as I looked out the window, I saw an angry crowd. This was about 1957 or 58. So you'll understand what I mean when I say it was mostly white women. Some were walking their children to school. The others were yelling and screaming, and you could just see the anger in their faces and the ugliness, hear the ugliness in their voices. And they were carrying placards. And on these placards were words. And above the placard, as you know, when you have a placard, you have the stick that sticks a little bit above. On that piece that stuck above the placard were black dolls, homemade, evidently. And on the placard and the chanting were these words: 2468. We don't want to integrate. 8642. We don't want aid. Not going to say the word. It's two words. The first word rhymes with a type of saw that has a vertical blade and has to saw teeth. Second word rhymes with the number 2. You can figure it out. Ugly, ugly, ugly. And the ugliness continued as the civil rights movement began to grow, as the fight for equality began to grow. So did the ugliness. So did the darkness. I saw it in nearly every school I went to from then on. The attacks on the black students by whites, the spitting on black students by whites, the ugliness around me. Our minister, a Unitarian minister in New Orleans, who was active in the civil rights movement, who had some black people attend our church. His home and his church were firebombed by the KKK. Several years later, we moved to Jackson, Mississippi. We moved back and forth between Mississippi and Louisiana. Our minister in Jackson, Mississippi, the Reverend Donald Thompson. The minister in New Orleans was the Reverend Albert D. Orlando. But our minister in Jackson at the Unitarian Church, a beautiful church, very unique design, had to be moved because of bomb threats. And the minister, the Reverend Thompson, on his way home one night from an NAACP meeting, taking a black man home from the meeting. When the Reverend Thompson got to his house, got out of his car and walked to his home, he was shot in the back by the KKK. And the doctors and the medical professionals said the only reason he survived was that he was a very large man. The only thing that kept him alive. Ugliness, darkness. And as I was getting older, because of our stand as Southerners in Mississippi, supporting school desegregation, supporting civil rights, as the hatred and the darkness and the ugliness began to increase, I became concerned. I became scared because I heard about the shootings of white people who tried to be impactful, who tried to make a difference in the lives of people and who tried to make a difference in society. I heard about them being murdered, driving at night on the roads. And as a child, as a young person, I was scared every time a car passed by that they were going to do something to us. Just that fear because of the environment in which I lived. And we remember that ugliness, don't we, as Unitarian Universalists? Dr. King, yes, he fought for civil rights and equal rights, but there were Unitarian Universalists who also stood right along with him The Reverend James Reed from Washington, D.C., Unitarian minister, went to Selma, Alabama, marched the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Remember the reading about that march? They called it Bloody Sunday because of all of the ugliness of the killings. Reverend Reeve, one night, coming out of a restaurant, was attacked by white supremacists. So bad that he died. Trying to be impactful, trying to make a difference in the lives of people. And then we remember Viola Louisi from Detroit, Michigan, Unitarian Universalist, went to Selma, Alabama to see what she could do, to be impactful, not just sitting at home saying, I intend to do something, but actually moving and acting. And one night on her way home from a march, driving some Black students to their homes, 4 KKK members drove next to her and shot her and killed her. And one of the members of the Klan in the car, Gary Thomas Rowe, he turned state's evidence. He became an FBI informant, and he gave up the name of the person who pulled the trigger. And the FBI put him in protective custody, and they were so concerned about him that they spread vicious rumors about Mrs. Louisi. They said she was a communist. That was the thing to do in those days. If you were left of center, you were a communist. They said she was a heroin addict. And they said that the only reason she went to Alabama was not to fight for civil rights, not to be impactful, but because she wanted to have sex with Black men. This mother, this wife, this activist, this Unitarian, this person who wanted to make a difference in the lives of other people, who wanted to be impactful, who wanted to make a difference in some small way to change society, to change the ugliness. More ugliness. Assassination of Bobby Kennedy, assassination of Martin Luther King, 3 civil rights workers killed by the Neshoba County Sheriff's Department in Philadelphia, Mississippi. You know the story. Medgar Evers, the brother of Charles Evers, murdered by Byron de la Beckwith, the KKK member. Took him to trial, got off. And where are we today? As we celebrate tomorrow, Martin Luther King Day, where are we today? Would Dr. King look at American society today and feel good about what he would see? My guess is that he wouldn't. My guess is that he might recognize some of the changes we've made, but he would be very brokenhearted because not enough people moved beyond intention. Not enough people became impactful and did more. And that's what we do sometimes, isn't it? We look around and say, more needs to be done. I intend to do more. And yet that's as far as it gets. Because the ugliness continues. We remember Trayvon Martin, murdered by George Zimmerman. We remember George Floyd. Remember all the Black men and women who have been killed by white supremacists and members of law enforcement. And this is not a blanket condemnation of law enforcement. It's not. I've had plenty of friends in law enforcement. Some good, some not so good. But where are we today? Are we still in the ugliness? Are there still people in the shadows? Still people who are marginalized? And see, the ugliness moves beyond race, moves beyond hatred, moves beyond culture. There is ugliness in every aspect of American society, not just racial divide, religious divide, the ugliness of caged children, the ugliness of the separation of children from their families, the ugliness of capital punishment, the ugliness of gun violence, the ugliness of domestic violence, the ugliness of child abuse, the ugliness of spousal abuse. And what are we doing about it? How are we being impactful in those areas of life? The ugliness of people who come out of prison with no real reentry program to get them back into society, to be productive and successful. The ugliness of animal abuse. Where are we today? We have to ask that question. And we have to answer that, and we have to answer it honestly. And the honest answer is we haven't come very far. Since the days of Viktor Frankl, since the days of Martin Luther King, since the days of the civil rights struggle, since the days of trying to do something to be impactful in society. There's several ways we can do that. But before we ask the question, how can we do that? We have to ask another question. It's a pre-question. Do I really want to do that? Do I want to move beyond intention and be impactful? Do I want to take action? Do I want to be active? Do I want to have some movement in my life? Do I want there to be fluidity in my life to make a change and make a difference, not only in the lives of individuals, but in the change society? Several ways we can do that. Number one, we have to look at who we are. We often hear people looking at somebody and say, who are you? Who are we as Unitarian Universalists? What do we have as our motto or our theme or whatever we want to call it? We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every single human being. Do we really? Are these just words and platitudes? Or do we really believe that? The inherent worth and dignity. Worth and dignity. Do we believe that? And if so, what are we doing to demonstrate that we believe that? Because in the Bible, not just in the Christian Bible, but in nearly all religions, there's this constant theme of don't just speak, don't just be hearers, be doers, move to action. James puts it this way, don't just be hearers of the word, be doers. Demonstrate what you believe. Demonstrate that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. There's not a single person listening to me this morning that doesn't know somebody who feels worthless, that doesn't know somebody who has had his or her dignity stripped away. Maybe through homophobic attitudes, maybe through Islamophobic attitudes, maybe through xenophobic attitudes. We know people who feel worthless. We know people who feel that their dignity has been stripped away. And what do we do about that? What do we do? How do we reach out to these people and give them a sense of worth, and give them a sense of value, and give them a sense of dignity? As I told you earlier, I conduct mental health therapy online. And with every new client I get, I give them a worksheet, a core belief worksheet. And the majority of people who fill those sheets out, their core belief is, I am not good enough. And my question to them is, good enough for what? Good enough to be loved? Good enough to be accepted? Good enough to matter? How many people do we know who feel they don't matter? And what are we doing about it? That's the challenge. That's one of the ways. Minister to these people, serve these people. Many Unitarian churches have that service is part of who they are. I believe this church says that as well. That love is the theme, service is the goal, something along those lines. Different churches word it differently. I'm not sure how this church words it. But it's about love and service. How do we serve those who feel worthless? How do we serve those who feel their dignity has been stripped? Second thing we need to do is look at what we have. One of the thinking errors in psychotherapy is confusing needs with wants. What do we have that we really don't need? And what are we doing with that? Jesus tells the rich young ruler to sell what he has and give to the poor. Do we do that? Do we look at the things we have in our homes and look at people who don't have those things, who can't afford those things, who live with the bare necessities? They could use some of the things we have that we don't really need. It's a good question. It's a good question. I have a friend who identifies as a socialist. And he has all these hyphenated words before he gets to the word socialist. And he harps constantly about the evils of capitalism. And yes, capitalism has its flaws. It certainly does. And he's constantly talking on Facebook about we need to do more. We need to help people take things we have, sell things and give. But when it came time to, as the saying back in the day, put his money where his mouth was, he failed, and he failed miserably. He and his family went to Africa, I believe it was Ghana, went there for a year. And he put on Facebook that he had this home that he lived in, he and his family. And he said that he was going to rent it out. What happened to his belief? What happened to his diatribe? Why didn't he look for a homeless family that could live in that home for a year? He also had a van he didn't need anymore. Put it up for sale. Why didn't he look for a family who couldn't afford a vehicle that needed one and give it to them? Sometimes the words we speak kind of hypocritical, aren't they? We're kind of hypocritical. Take a look at what we have and see if there's some way we could turn that into some type of service to other people. The third thing we can do is look at the power that we have. We have a lot more power than we think we do. We have the power to lift people up. We have the power to make a difference in society. We have the power to reach out to the broken and the battered and the bruised. That was the main theme I had when I served as minister of Fjord Lake Community Friends Church in Syracuse. Society of Friends Church, Quaker. You wouldn't think it, but that's what they claim. I was chastised bitterly for talking about the broken and the battered and the bruised, talking about people in the shadows, talking about those who are marginalized. And the clerk of the meeting came to my office one morning and said, Jimmy, the people you want to bring into this church can't pay the bills. And yet they talked about love when they sang hymns about love. They will know we are Christians by our love. And yet the battered and the broken and the bruised and the marginalized and the people in the shadows weren't included. Do we include them? Will we include them? It's a story of a man who looked around and saw all of the darkness and the ugliness in society. And he looked up to the heavens and he asked God, why don't you do something? And God looked down and said, why don't you? Why don't you? Why don't we? What can we do from this week forward to spread a little love, to spread a little kindness? What abused animal can we take into our homes? What child can we be a big brother or a big sister to? How can we help the battered women's shelters? How can we reach out to those who are living on the streets? Now, I don't know you and you don't know me very well. And I'm sure many of you do what you can to serve humanity, to lift people out of the darkness. to fight for equality and civil rights for all people, not just a certain group. Everybody who has been hurt or harmed by ugliness, we can do something. We can do more. Maybe sitting, listening, saying, I do a lot. But the truth is, we can all do more. There's a joke I'd like to tell you in closing. It's about two ranchers. One lived in Texas and one lived in Australia, one of the little states in Australia. And these two men had been college roommates here in the States. They hadn't seen each other, talked to each other in 20 years. And the Texan decided he was going to try to find his friend, and he did. Then he invited his friend to come to Texas, and his friend in Australia said, no, I've been to the States. You've never been to Australia. You come see me. So the arrangements were made, and the Texan went to Australia, met him at the airport, went through all the amenities. Next morning, had breakfast together. And the Australian said, I'd like to take you out and show you my ranch. They were both ranchers. As they walked, the Australian looked at the Texan and said, isn't this the biggest ranch you've ever seen? The Texan said, oh, that's nothing. Back in Texas, we have them twice this size. Walked a little bit further. The Australian said, look at these cattle. You've never seen cows this big, I can guarantee you. The Texan said, hey, you know what? We have them twice that size in Texas. Walk just a little bit further. There comes a kangaroo hopping across. And the Texan looked startled and he jumped back and he said, what in the world was that? To which the Australian replied, don't you have grasshoppers in Texas? How big of an impact are we willing to have in society? Can we start this week, from this day forward? Can we start to have a big impact on the lives of the broken and the battered and the bruised? Can we have a big impact on society? Can we demonstrate love and kindness greater than we ever have? Can we truly be proud that we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every single person on the face of the earth? Amen. And now may we be a blessing to everyone we meet. And may the words we speak reflect the divine love that is with each of us. And may we truly seek to reach out to the battered, the broken, and the bruised. Amen.